Well, good afternoon or morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Developing the Passport Learning Outcomes and Proficiency Criteria for Teamwork and Value Systems. I'm Kate Springsteen, Project Coordinator, Member in Education Services for Interstate Passport. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available at www.wichi.edu/passport/webinars by tomorrow, April 15th. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please type your question into the box on the GoToWebinar panel, and it will be brought to the presenter's attention. Following this webinar, I will be sending out an email with information on where to find a recording of the webinar, as well as a link to a survey, which we would very much appreciate if you would fill out. I'm delighted to introduce you to our presenters for today's webinar, William Albritton and Rebekah Villafana. William is an Associate Professor of Information and Computer Science at Leeward Community College, where he has taught since 2008. Past and current positions within the college include IT Committee Chair, Curriculum Committee Chair, and Faculty Senate Chair. His community service includes volunteering at science fairs, computer education events, and Access Surf. Previously, he taught ICS courses at the University of Hawaii at Manoa for 6 years, and also taught scuba diving on Maui and English in Japan as an assistant language teacher. William received his BA in physics and minor in Japanese from Oberlin College, and an MS in ICS from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Rebekah is currently an associate adjunct instructor in the sociology department at College of the Canyons, located in Southern California. She serves on the Curriculum Committee and Civic Engagement Steering Committee, and she is a co-advisor for the Sociology Club. Rebekah has a background in basic education and taught English as a second language and evidence-based reading instruction in the Division of Adult and Career Education for Los Angeles Unified School District for 10 years. Her Baccalaureate of Arts and Master's of Arts degrees are both in sociology and were earned at California State University, Northridge. Additionally, she holds a full-time adult education teaching credential from the University of San Diego. Welcome, William and Rebekah.
Thank you. So, this is William Albritton again from Hawaii.
And this is Rebekah Villafana, and I'm from College of the Canyons again in Southern California.
Okay, so let's jump into our presentation here. And for today's webinar, we'll give a brief overview of the Interstate Passport. What is it? What's its purpose? And some key components. We'll also talk about the process we went through for developing the PLOs, okay, the Passport Learning Outcomes, and the PCs, so Proficiency Criteria. And this is for the teamwork and value systems. So we'll talk a bit about the task, the achievements, the process, timeline, and again, the PLOs, the PCs, and then finally talk a little bit about how and why to become a member of the Interstate Passport Network.
So moving on to a quick overview of the Interstate Passport. This project is really designed to reduce unnecessary repetition of academic work once students transfer to a four-year institution. And so the purpose of the passport is really specifically regarding lower division courses in general education, and it's designed so that students don't have to repeat coursework that has particular outcomes. So the project is outcome-based, and so if students have received an education in a particular area, then they don't necessarily need to repeat it once they get to the next institution. This also saves students cost in tuition, and it reduces the time frame for them to complete a degree.
So this is a new program, and again, aids with a student transfer, and it's a grassroots initiative. So this originated by academic leaders in the Western states, and again, as Rebekah said, we're focusing on lower division general education. So first 2 years, so 100 level and 200 level courses. And this is a block transfer. So once they fulfill all the requirements, which are based on learning outcomes and proficiency criteria, then they use that at the next institution. And these were developed by the multi-state faculty negotiations, which we'll talk a bit more about in this presentation. And then to kind of track the progress, we have the National Student Clearinghouse keeping track of the students' academic progress.
And so this is a slide about the process for the Interstate Passport, and Will and I were involved in the second and third component, which was developing the passport learning outcomes for each of the area and developing the proficiency criteria for that passport learning outcome, and specific to teamwork and value systems. And so that was the part that we were involved with.
Let's see, so a little bit more detail on the overall passport. So it's from 9 general education areas, and this is based on LEAP, so Liberal Education, America's Promise. The essential learning outcomes, the ELOs from that, and that's from the Association of American Colleges and Universities, the AAC&U. And first part are the basics are the foundational skills, so oral communication, written communication, and quantitative literacy. And everything kind of builds on those skills. Then we have knowledge of concepts. So the natural sciences, human cultures, human society, and the individual, and then creative expression. Finally, we have cross-cutting skills. So they're not necessarily specific to with one class. Okay, they fit in with all areas there.
So how were the PLOs and the PCs developed by Teamwork and Value Systems? Well, folks from all different states, from Utah, Hawaii, Southern California, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oregon, we had different representatives come together and we had some negotiation days. And so part of our task was from October to February, we were to develop learning outcomes, and these were specifically to be able to explain what a student should know and then what they should be able to do with regard to teamwork and value systems. And then from February to May, we were working on the proficiency criteria, which are simple suggestions about how a student might meet the proficiency expectation within that learning outcome specific to teamwork and value systems.
And then the difference with the passport learning outcomes and proficiency criteria here. So the learning outcomes are kind of general statements explaining what a student should know or be able to do, and something measurable. And then it's similar to course objectives or competencies, or we say course outcomes, excuse me, for different courses. And then the proficiency criteria. So it's just suggestions on how students could demonstrate these learning outcomes. So they demonstrate how proficient they are at these outcomes. And it's just suggestions of activities, assignments, projects that students could do in class.
So some of the achievements that we accomplished were meeting the passport project goals and our deadlines, having collegial completely faculty-driven development of these PLOs and the PCs. And then we had fantastic conversations and dialogues and negotiations back and forth about what we are expecting lower division GE students to be able to accomplish in terms of teamwork and value systems. And so there was interdisciplinary cooperation where we had folks from communications, engineering, business, English, computer science, all these different areas coming together and saying, okay, what does teamwork and value systems look like, you know, in these different fields? And then we had professional development of, you know, everyone at these workshops in Boulder, and then we had folks returning back to our campuses after we had these negotiation meetings to be able to educate our own states about the benefits of the Passport project.
Let's see, so a little more specifics here on the process. So for the Passport learning outcomes, we had the state committees meeting at first. So representatives at certain colleges came together and figured out learning outcomes for the state in general. So that was in October 2015. Then we sent the state reps to Boulder, and that was early November 2015. So that's the meeting that Rebekah was talking about. And after we decided on things, decided on the learning outcomes, then the state committee reviewed them. So we took it back to the state, at least in my institution, I took it back to faculty to get this kind of feedback from folks. And then we had a couple conference calls, and we finally finalized the learning outcomes on December 8th, 2015. So then our next step was the proficiency criteria. Again, we worked within the state. We met with state people from different campuses within each state, and then that was in January 2016. Again, we sent state reps to Boulder. That was about mid-February. So we had another meeting face-to-face to come up with proficiency criteria. And again, we took it back to our state, getting feedback from our institution, and then we had a couple conference calls, and we finalized things on, or finalized the proficiency criteria on April 4th, 2016.
So there were some different concerns that we came across, things like institutional identity, dumbing down curriculum or having to change curriculum. Folks I know at different institutions were concerned about, you know, do we have to change the courses we already offer? And then this idea of top-down curriculum development, just different logistical issues at state level that might have to do with the way your courses are constructed. And then, of course, each state wanted to know, what do we gain from being a part of this Interstate Passport project? What would we lose? And how are we going to be able to measure those gains or losses and those outcomes?
Let's see. So before the meeting that we had in Boulder, so each state, we created a list of outcomes. And then we made a crosswalk, so the Wiki put together everything in one large chart or table. I'll show you that on the next slide. And everyone was pretty different. So once we got together, we had to kind of decide, okay, which to go with, which learning outcomes to go with, and it was a 2-day process. But in general, so we kind of found one institution with learning outcomes that we liked, and then tweaked those and worked on those so everyone was in agreement. Let me show you the next slide here. Okay, so here's example of the different, or here's the different states that came together. And then might be a little harder to actually read the text there, but you can see everyone was a little quite different with the learning outcomes that they came up with. And as I was saying, we agreed on one in particular that we liked, and then we tweaked and added and subtracted to those the learning outcomes. And show you our meeting here. So we had we wrote down a lot of ideas on paper, as well as once we started getting to the end of the process, we put it on the big screen and talked a bit about wordsmithing and that kind of stuff. But I remember at some points we're kind of divided on a couple things, and then I think I was on one side, a couple people, and then other folks had a different ideas. So finally we just had to call it to a vote and then just go with the majority. But at the end, I think we're all pretty pleased with the learning outcomes, and let me show you what we came out with. So one thing was just agreeing on what teamwork was and what value systems are. So we came out with a definition that we like for that, and we boiled it down into 5 different learning outcomes. And then even for those, we had on the left-hand column here, just a general, word or a couple words about what these are, what we're doing, and then exact language here for the actual learning outcomes on the right-hand column.
So very similar to how we developed the passport learning outcomes, we moved to developing the proficiency criteria. And so we followed that same process, and really we focused on aligning assignments with each of the list of learning outcomes that you saw on the previous slide. And so that was kind of our goal, and working on the language so that it would make sense for all different disciplines, because sometimes we can use discipline-specific words, and so we had to make sure that we were very inclusive. Also include examples for the proficiency criteria of different assessment modalities. And then I mentioned disciplinary omissions already, and then just different levels of diversity and how are we being inclusive in those assignments. And then we did a lot of brainstorming in terms of what different folks do in their own classrooms, the faculty that were working on this, and so we were able to see that and discuss it and use that to our benefit. And then just simple formatting and wordsmithing. So again, here is our team that was working on these passport criteria areas, and this picture doesn't quite capture it, but we did use a lot of charts in our team, and we were writing down information and brainstorming ideas so that we could kind of get everyone's ideas out there, and then narrowing it down to, okay, how do we make this match our learning outcomes? And so we were very pleased with what our outcomes actually were. And so on this screen you'll see, and it's pretty tiny, but I'm going to read to you actually a couple of examples. So for example, teamwork fundamentals, which was one of our learning outcomes, an example of how that could, sort of an assignment that would go with that would be reading a case study and learning key aspects of teamwork, and then have students take a test on those different aspects of teamwork. Another example might be breaking students into small groups, having them discuss previous or past experiences with teamwork, and then having the group identify what worked and what didn't work. Another example was completing a worksheet identifying teamwork concepts related to a fictional or real life scenario, and those could even include something like a film like 12 Angry Men. So that's a couple of examples about how you know, students could meet the proficiency of learning teamwork values. So that would be reading a case study, getting into small groups, and then, you know, doing a worksheet with a film or something like that. So lots of different ideas that could be applied to many, many different disciplines.
Let's see. So for this slide, talk a bit about, let's see. So once we took the proficiency criteria back to our institutions and agreed on them, so the next step was create the passport block. And at Leeward Community College, it was a pretty informal process. So I tried two things. There wasn't anything in place officially to approve the passport learning blocks. So one thing I did was go through the catalog and just see courses that had to do with teamwork and our value systems. And so I sent emails to specific professors that were teaching those courses. And then I just also sent out a blanket email to all faculty just explaining the Wiki Passport and teamwork and value systems part of that, and asking for people who thought that their course learning outcomes met or matched up to the teamwork and value systems learning outcomes. So we came up with the speech 151. So personal and public speech, they do a lot of teamwork in that course. And then there was the leadership course, IS 107V. And then I couldn't list all the courses here, but there were several theater courses that also met the requirements.
And so at College of the Canyons, we're actually exploring becoming a passport institution. In California, we have a different way of operating in terms of our community colleges and the UCs and the Cal State systems. We already have designated courses that transfer from the community colleges to the UCs and the Cal States. But in terms of interstate, which is what the Interstate Passport Project is really all about, we are exploring this idea. And so a little bit different than at Leeward, in February, our institution actually had a several-hour meeting, and I think there was about 15 or 20 faculty from many different departments, from biology, chemistry, Spanish, geology, photography, counseling folks, sociology, history, geography. There was somebody also from math at that meeting. We got together and the Interstate Passport Project was explained, and then different folks worked on the 9 different areas in terms of looking through courses and deciding, okay, from our institution, which of these courses would fit in the passport blocks. And so one of the things that we did is we looked at the courses that are the most taken. I think it was the top 100 courses that our students actually enroll in, and then drawing from that list of classes. And so for teamwork and value systems, we were looking at Counseling 150, which is student success. We mentioned Theater 110, Understanding Theater. There was a look at Communications 120, and then even I think a dance course, and then maybe a combination of 2 courses, possibly theater ensembles and also production courses. But I think in the end, one of the courses that fit the best was the Counseling 150. Some concerns that we had at our institution are that the passport learning outcomes are not in the course outline, but they might actually be taught in the course. And then I actually learned yesterday there was some other folks that had concerns where the PLOs are not in the course outline and they're not taught in the course, but the main instructors for those courses loved the different areas, the proficiency areas, and they want to implement these things in their courses, especially for the teamwork and value systems. And so they saw, you know, what we had accomplished and these criterion and these outcomes, and they said we need to be teaching these in our courses. So I just learned that yesterday. That was really interesting. But we also decided to involve counselors in this process. There were a lot of meetings that went on our campus also that were a little bit less informal to get as much feedback in the process about this. And then I know this was actually brought to our curriculum committee yesterday in terms of still exploring this option. And then at a later date, the idea of teamwork and value systems and where does that belong on our campus inside of our curriculum is going to kind of be just brought forward in terms of having a discussion about it. You know, if this is something our campus values, then, you know, how do we make sure that that's seen in our courses? So it's been a process for sure.
So we'll talk a bit now about how and why to become an Interstate Passport Network member. So some reasons here why you might be interested in becoming an Interstate Passport institution. So like we were saying, this not only facilitates transfer across state lines, but also within states. And it eliminates a lot of the obstacles to transfer for student success, and then eliminates the review of lower division general education courses as far as any changes in articulation agreements. So at least in Hawaii, I know that you know, we have 10 campuses, and then we pull everyone together for these articulation agreements. That would be a little harder to do across the whole country. So the passport system, again, helps with transferring with other states' institutions. And then we focus on quality for positive impact on completion. So it's based on what students should learn, and then also what they should be able to apply. So we also have, it generates data on the academic success after transfer, and we also have a way for continuous self-improvement. It also adapts to higher education's changing landscape in respect to assessments. They're still, you know, those are still determined by the institutions, say the department or program. And then we can also pull in non-course-based educational experiences if that's the case.
And so how does one get involved and become a network member? Faculty can review passport learning outcomes for congruence. That's one approach. And also construct the institution's passport block. So for example, there are folks at my institution that came on board to get involved and made suggestions. From the administrator perspective, folks can apply for passport status and then sign a MOU. And advisors can inform students and advise students about the passport and how that works. In terms of the registrars and institutional researchers, they will be the ones actually awarding the passport. And then also the registrars will be sending their information to the National Student Clearinghouse, and so they're the ones that will actually be doing the tracking of the academic progress of passport students to ensure that this methodology is helping our students to be successful when they transfer.
Let's see. So if you go to the WICHE website, we have some specific steps for institution to become a part of the Interstate Passport Program. And then one of the more important steps is create a block for each knowledge or skill area. So this is a set of courses that represents the learning outcomes for that area. And we have specific worksheets that you can download and fill out for that. Okay, so as far as quality assurance goes, there's a few requirements for the students. So one is a minimum grade of a C. Then after they transfer, we are keeping track of the student progress. So we want to see how well the students do that earn a passport, how well they do at other institutions. So that's through the National Student Clearinghouse. Then there's also a review board monitoring of the interstate passport efficacy. And we also have evaluation research study of the impact of the interstate passport. And that's with the Education and Employment Research CTR at Rutgers University School of Management and Labor Relations. And then finally, we also have a pilot. So this is mapping assignments to certain learning outcomes. Colorado, Montana, New Mexico, and the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems.
So there are plenty of ways to get involved and to find out more information. And so you can click on this link and you can check out the passport learning outcomes and proficiency criteria for the 9 different areas. Today we were just talking about teamwork and value systems. And then you can also check out the faculty handbook in terms of how one would actually go about constructing your own institution's passport block so that we can help ease the interstate transfer of our students.
So any questions about the interstate passport? Please, please send in any questions you might have to the institution, to WICHE or to any of us. We'll be happy to answer your questions.
Well, thanks, Rebekah and William. I do have a question. The question is, does my institution need to adopt the passport learning outcomes and the proficiency criteria to become a network member?
Well, my understanding is between institutions. So the institution doesn't have to change the curriculum or learning outcomes for certain courses, or even what is taught on those courses, or what assignments are used in those courses. So instead you take what's already existing and then match it up to the learning outcomes that already exist with the interstate passport, and then the proficiency criteria are suggestions for assignments that you can use in your classes. Not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah, thanks, William. There's a saying, just to follow up on that, we like to say that institutions must have learning outcomes that are consistent with and not in conflict with the passport learning outcomes.
okay.
And then the next question that I have is, will there be any renegotiation of the passport learning outcomes in the future, or are these learning outcomes set in stone?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
My understanding is that the Passport Review Board is in charge of monitoring these types of things, including, the potential renegotiation. And so I think that as they continue to monitor, that's where you know, they would be reviewing what's going on to make a determination if that's something that should happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Passport Review Board is comprised of the passport state facilitators of each state, and if there's a if the passport state facilitators are continuously hearing concerns about any potential learning outcome or any learning outcomes, they might call back those teams to look at those learning outcomes again and say, how can we fix this? We've got these problems going on. How can we fix this?
Okay.
Okay, those are all the questions that I have. If you guys come up with further questions, feel free to email myself or William and Rebekah, and we'd be happy to answer those questions.
All right.
Great.
Well, thanks, Rebekah and William, again, and thanks for everybody who was on the call. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.